Today we're going to take a look at graphing our daily views for our Rails application. Now you can see here, these are the total views that we have in our Rails application through some seeded data. And if we come into the individual posts, we can see how many views each post is getting each day. Of course, this is all just random data right now. It's not an actual representation of what the data looks like, but this will update in real time as you have users navigating through your page or through your website. So we're going to be using the Ahoy gem. This is going to do our daily analytics. If I full screen this, we're going to be using Chartkick. This is going to be the charting or Chart.js implementation for Rails. We're going to be using the Groupdate gem to do our grouping by months. And the Chartkick and the Groupdate have a gem spotlight up on the channel. You can go find that, where I covered implementing these real fast if that's all you're interested in. But the real powerhouse here is going to be Ahoy, which is going to let us do events whenever we view a page. And then we can sum up those events to chart our data. Because if we just have a view counter, there's no way for us to break up the views by day. So that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay, we are now in our main Rails app, and the first thing I'm going to do is a db:/reset in here to get rid of the data that's running in my demo application here. And then I'm going to go ahead and type Rails S to refresh the app so we can see what we currently have. So if I come into our app and I click login, and I log in with dean@example.com, and then I go over to the admin page. And then on the admin page, if I view the posts, we really don't have any data showing up for us. So the first thing we need to do is implement the Ahoy gem. So to do this, the first thing we always do is we have to add the gem. So I'm going to hit F11, bundle, add Ahoy _matey, just like a pirate would say. And then you can go ahead and run that command. Now that we have Ahoy added, we're going to go ahead and run the generator command. So it's going to be this Rails generate Ahoy install if I zoom in so you don't need a magnifying glass. So I'm going to go ahead and run that command in my terminal here. Okay, that's done. It now wants us to do a Rails db:/migrate command. Now we can exit out of here. Now that we have that, we can basically just start tracking movement throughout our application. So to do this, I have a post controller. You're going to want to add this to whichever controller you'd like. If you add it to the application controller, you could do site-wide events. In this case, I'm only interested in seeing stuff when you do it in the post controller. So if you're in the post controller and you're going to the show page, so you're viewing a post, if I start the server, if you're viewing a post, then I would like to have an event fire that tells the Rails app, hey, you have to increment the view counter because this view counter right here is going to be inaccurate. So to do this, we're going to go into the show action for our model. And then in the show action, the only thing we need to do is create an event with Ahoy, which we can do by typing ahoy.track. We're going to name this viewed post, and just like GitHub Copilot is suggesting, we'll then give it a post ID of @post.id. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'm going to right click on blog and open a new tab. Now that we're in here, I'm going to move everything down and click show post for the post title 1. If we now scroll up here for a few minutes to find everything, we can see that it inserts into the Ahoy visits a whole bunch of information. That's definitely a privacy concern if you have to be GDPR compliant. And if you don't know what that means, I'd suggest looking into it because you can get in trouble in Europe. So that's fine. We don't need to use all this data. So you could even null it out if you'd like to. For the sake of this tutorial, it doesn't matter. I'm not putting this on the internet. But then we have the Ahoy events here, which has our visit ID, user ID, name, properties, and time. If we look at what this information is, our visit ID is just whatever the visit is. The user ID is actually just grabbing our device user already, so we didn't have to do anything there. No thinking required, my favorite. The name is whatever we named this event. So if we want to search for it, we just search by name and then whatever the string was. So you could even just put the word post in here and then search for post. Properties is going to be whatever we added into our, at the end here. So if we put this into like a set of braces here and we call this properties, this is essentially what we've done when we inserted into, or when we added the post ID at the end. So that's why we have a set of properties here with the post ID. And then the time is just whenever this happens. And this is the magic part, because each of these is their own little object. We can then sort these by the time that we created them. So that's going to give us our events. If we now come in here and if we, we can just refresh the page a few times, go over to maybe, I don't know, the 0th post. I'll refresh this like 3 or 4 times, and then I'll hit Control C to stop the server, F11 to full screen, Control L to clear the console, Control plus to zoom in, Rails C to open up the Rails console. We can then do a Ahoy : event, which is going to give us our Ahoy event connection. We can then do a .all to see all of our events. So here you go. This is listing them all inside of an array. So we have a viewed post, which was the second one. So we viewed the second one 2 times. We viewed the first one 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. So how do we now convert this? If I hit Control L, how do we convert this into data that we can use to create those charts? Well, we have our event.all. We know that we can search by the name of the event, and we know that we can search by the post ID because we have that in there. But I want to grab the first event for now because I want to take a look at this. So when we do our Ahoy event.where, which is how we're going to be finding stuff, we need to be aware, no pun intended, that the properties is going to be inside of this little hash. So that means I can't do something like where post ID is equal to 2 because it doesn't have that. What we can do instead is we can, inside of our where, we can do a little bit of magic with Postgres. And this will also work for SQLite, but I should warn you, in this case, I'm using Postgres, so the syntax is going to be different. If you're using a different database, you're going to have to switch what we're searching for here. But effectively what we're doing is we're casting a search in the properties. The properties are going to be of type, or they're going to be searching for the post ID in the properties. And we're going to cast this as a big int because that's just how it's stored. We then do an equals and the question mark to insert whatever we're searching for into the string. So that's going to be replaced with this question mark. And then we want to search for the post ID. So if we want to find all of the events on our second post, I'm going to put the number 2 in here, hit enter. And you can now see we're getting only the posts where the ID, or only the events where the post ID is 2. So I can now tell you definitively that the second post has had 2 Ahoy visits today where someone visited the post, and it's based on this event. Now there might be a better way to do this because this does seem a little bit messy, but this is just how I managed to piece it together myself. Okay, so we can grab all of our daily events by ID. So let's do that. Let's just name this daily events equal to this, and it's only going to be the daily events for the second post. Right now we're just trying to build out our logic, and then we can replace that 2 with a post ID in a bit here. So I'm now going to hit enter. That'll give us our daily events, and now we want to use the group by gem right here, which means we have to add it. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the console, hit Control L, and then we just need to do the, looks like it's named the group date. So I'm going to say bundle add group date. I can never remember these things. Okay, that gives us our group date. Let's now go ahead and type Rails C again to enter the console because we're actually done now setting up group date. I'm now going to hit up on the arrow key and have the console bug out on me. I'm going to hit up on the arrow key, there we go, and I'm going to get the daily events. I'm now going to grab the daily events variable, and I'm going to call a method on it called group _by _day. And then you can see here, if I hit enter, it tells me that it was given 1, but expected 2 arguments. So the argument we need to give it is what is the thing we're grouping by. So in this case, it's saying group by day, but it needs to know like what time are we grouping by. If we look at our events, we don't have the created at that we had in the spotlight. Like I can't use post.first.created at because the Ahoy event doesn't have a created at field. So instead, we have to use the time. So we're going to grab the daily events.first, and then we're going to say daily events.group by day, and we'll pass in the time. And then we'll get rid of this extra period here so it'll actually work. Now it looks like we don't have anything here, but if I type .count, it'll give me a result here with Wednesday the 29th that had 2 visits. So now we're able to group our daily events, whatever they may be, by the day that they occurred at. And we can't really test it right now because I don't want to create like a whole event that allows me, or with the like yesterday's date. So we'll just work with the current day, and then I'll show you how to seed it with test data in a minute here. So we're going to grab both of these things. So we need this daily events, and then we need the daily events.groupBy. So we want to copy that logic because we're going to use it in our model. So I'm going to exit out of here, hit Control D, Control L, and we can go over to our post.rb, which is the model that we're tracking this data for. So I'm going to come into the post.rb, and I'm going to create a method. I'm going to call this method views underscore by underscore day. And then I'm going to paste in what we just did because we already did the hard work. And I'm going to replace this 2 just with the ID of the post. And then we can exit out of here, and we can hopefully scroll up and grab the daily events. Right click that, come in here. We're not going to assign the daily events. We're just going to return it. So this will work. But if you remember from the video, we also need to give this a range for when this happens. We're going to do the range after we seed the data, just so that we have something a bit more interesting to look at. Right now, it doesn't matter what the date range is because all the dates are today. So now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and save this. And we can go over to, I guess, our admin page. So let's go over to views, admin, and we want to go into our show post in our admin page. And inside of our show post in our admin page, we just want to create a chart. So we'll do that, I guess, above the title here, maybe. So we'll come above the title, and we'll just do a line chart for the @post views underscore by underscore day. We'll save that. And I'm remembering now we didn't actually add Chartkick, so this won't work. So I'm not even going to bother showing you that it doesn't work because, I mean, we didn't add the gem. There's no shock there. So let's go over to chartkick.com. We're going to grab the Chartkick gem. So we'll say bundle add Chartkick. Okay, now that I'm outside of the procedural terrain generation repo, we're going to type bundle add Chartkick like a intelligent person would. That will run our bundler, add the Chartkick gem. Now that we have that, we can add the Chartkick.js files. Let me zoom in so you can actually see this. We got to add these 2 pins to our config/import map. You can either go to the config folder, or you can just type Control P and then just search for config import. You don't even have to spell it right, and VS Code will take you there. Once we're in here, we're going to paste this in at the bottom. We'll save this. And I'm actually not going to add the JavaScript yet, so you can see what that error looks like, just to make sure you're not messing anything up with the JavaScript. I'm going to run a Rails S, come over to our blog, and I'm going to go to the one that's viewing the post and log in on that page. I guess I'm already logged in. Cool. I'm going to go over to the actual admin panel, and I'm going to click on the title 0. And you can see here it says loading. This tripped me up the first time I ran into it. This is what you'll see if you don't have your JavaScript for Chartkick installed. It'll just show you the loading page, which is also a cool way to see what it looks like if it's loading the data. We can then grab the 2 imports, and we're just going to go into the, the JavaScript folder, the application.js. We're going to paste this in at the bottom, hit Control S to save it, come back over to our admin page, hit Control R to refresh, and we now have 1 data point with 7 views. If I refresh, come over here, refresh, we now have 8. I can mash the refresh button several times, and you'll see that number just skyrocket. Okay, so that's cool, but now let's do the total data so that you can have that. Just in case you're not interested in seeding it, maybe you've seen the video before, I don't want to waste your time showing you the seeding. We'll do the seeding at the end. So I'm going to exit out of all of this, and I'm going to come up to the the views, the admin page, and we're going to go into the index page, I guess. Inside of the index page, we're actually just going to full screen. We're going to render a partial called admin/total daily views, which means we have to come into admin, right click, new file, underscore total daily views.html.erb. And then in the total daily views, we're going to do something similar to what we just did, which is a line chart for the post.total underscore views underscore by underscore day. We'll save that. We'll come up to the post.rb where we need to create that method. So we'll do that right below the views by day. I'm going to create a self.total daily views method here. I'm going to create the daily events, but here instead of doing this weird where statement where we're searching by the ID, all we need to do is say daily events is Ahoy event where the name is the viewed post because that's what we called it. Now this is a bit of magic string nonsense here. I don't like this. I think it'd be better if we just used like the model class name, but this is just the hole I've dug and now I've got to deal with it. The next thing we're going to do is we're just going to do the same group by day time that we did in the last one. So we'll go ahead and do that. Hit Control S, exit out of here, refresh, and we now have a chart with our total views instead of just for that one post. So let me go over to a different post. I'll check out post 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And now we expect this 18 to change to some other value, 22. So it looks like I did actually refresh 4 times. So that works. Now let's maybe add in our a bit of styling just in case. I'll ruin the surprise, I guess. But we're actually going to change how the chart looks. So instead of doing the line chart, what I've done here is I've done a area chart, which is just going to fill the area under the curve. Hello, calculus. And I'm filling it with A00A. So this is A for the red, 0 for the green, 0 for the blue, and A for the alpha. We'll save that, we'll refresh, and you won't see anything yet. You can see like a red dot, but it's going to shade underneath the curve when we have some data in here. I'm going to grab this same thing and we're going to go into our post show page in the admin panel specifically. And in the admin panel's post show page, we're going to replace the line chart with something similar where we have the colors. A smarter person would have done this in the or in a partial where we can share it between the two. But in this case, I'm not being smart. But this post doesn't have any data. So let me actually come into the post and go to the 0th one. That one actually has some data. So we're good to go there. Now let's go into our seed file, give ourselves some data so we can move on with our lives. We're going to go down to the DB seeds and the development.rb seed. And we're going to do a little bit of refactoring in here, but I'm going to go a little bit quick with the copying and pasting because you probably don't care. So we're going to switch how we do this. We have our users being created here. We're going to just put these inside of a method and we're going to switch it to be user.create. So we're going to have to run this seed each time. We're not going to be doing the find stuff anymore. That's just because we don't want to create multiple instances of these events because it doesn't really make sense anymore. We're then going to do the same thing for the addresses. We'll put them in a method. We'll switch it to address create. We'll then do the same thing for the categories. And we're not going to have a category variable anymore. We're just going to say seed the categories. We're then going to have for our the post stuff in here, we can cut this out. We can come above the elapsed and we can put in a post seed where we have the post equal to the array. And then we'll just add in the user first, user second, and the category, and nothing else in here will change. That will allow us to just call this method instead of having it all inside of that one benchmark method. Now let's come down to the benchmark. And before we do the benchmark, right up here, we're going to call those 3 methods in this order. We'll seed the users, seed the addresses, seed the categories. And we actually had the seeding development database thing up here. I'm going to move this down and I'm going to put it right here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to seed the posts and comments. And that will just go inside of the benchmark. What I would like to do now, and we can actually just move this all in here. I don't know why I keep separating all this logic. There's no point to it. Let's just put it all in here, keep everything nice and organized. Now that we have this at the bottom here, we're going to call one more method, and this is going to be the new one that is kind of confusing. Unfortunately, seeding the Ahoy stuff is a bit of a nightmare. So we're going to create a method, call it seed Ahoy. And in here, the first thing we're going to do is say geocode off. I don't know why we're setting the geocode to false. That's just what I found online. We're then going to have to create a request. And the reason why we're creating a request, which you'll see right here, is a openstruct.new. The reason why we're doing this is because the visit properties seems to require a request in order for you to create a Ahoy event in the seed file with a custom date. I just put in a whole bunch of nonsense here. You could switch this for whatever you want. I just made the refer example.com. I gave it a fake IP of 0.0. I gave it a user agent, which is usually like the browser that they used, I think. And I just switched it to Internet Explorer. Lol, can you imagine? And for the original URL, you can just put like your Rails app URL if you want, or you can just put the word Rails in there. This doesn't really matter because we're only using it for analytics right now. But then we can create a visit properties here, which is from Ahoy's visit properties, where you call .new, pass in the request, and we're not doing anything API related, so we pass in nil for the API. We can then create some properties with this, which is equal to visit properties.generate.select, where you pass in a underscore and a v, and then you just return v. Again, there's probably a cleaner way to do this, but for now, this is just what I managed to get working after tons of Googling. We can then create a example visit. So I'm going to say example visit is equal to Ahoy : visit : create. We're then going to call properties.merge, and then we're going to merge the visit underscore token to be a secure random.uuid. We're then going to create a visitor token, which is going to be a secure random, and that's going to give us our example visit. And now finally, we can create the loop that will seed all of the Ahoy events. And this is going to be a little bit slower, so we're going to keep the number low here because I don't know how to do the import with the Ahoy events. It was just not behaving earlier. So we're going to do a 2.months loop .ago, which means it's going to start 2 months ago. It's going to go to the date that we specify, which is up to the date.today. Just a whole bunch of Rails nonsense, but basically this is going to take every day from 2 months ago until today and give us that date in a date variable. Once we have the date iterator here, we can then loop through all of our posts, which is just a post.each. And for each of the posts, we can then do a rand from 1 to 5 dot times do, and we'll just say x. And this is just going to randomly create 1 to 5 events. So 1 to 5 views for each of these posts. And then finally, we can call Ahoy : event dot create exclamation. We'll search, or we'll give it the name of viewed post. Again, this is why the magic string wasn't great, because now we're calling it in 3 different places. So that probably needs to be refactored in a future video. We can pass it a visit, which is just going to be our example underscore visit. We can pass it some properties, which is just going to be our post ID, which is going to be the post.id. This post is coming from this post iterator. And then after that, we can finally give this a fake time, which we'll set to be date.to_time plus some random amount of hours, 0.23 plus rand 0.59 minutes. And after all of that, we can now hit Control S and hope that this works. I'm going to hit F11 exit out, Control C to stop the server, and then I'm going to type in the console Rails db : reset. I'm going to reset the database and we're going to see what happens. Okay, so you can see here I have a capital C on create for the Ahoy. So let's come up here to wherever that is, right here, the example visit. This needs to be a lowercase c. We'll hit Control S to save it, F11 to exit out, F11 to full screen this one, and then db reset again to reset the database. Now it's going through and it's creating all of the events here. And for my benchmarks, this seems to take about 10 seconds to create all of them. But I mean, it's creating, a couple hundred views, I think. So yeah, 12 seconds. So now that that's done, let's go ahead and type Rails S to start the server. I'm going to come over to the one that's just viewing the third post, and I'm going to refresh because I'm going to have to log in again. I'm going to log in as dean@example.com with a password of password. I'm going to come over to the blog, look at the first post. It has 5 comments, looks good to me. Then I'm going to refresh the admin page, and now you can see we have all of our data in here. So this is our first post's views since April 29th until now, which is the last 2 months. So let's go ahead and change this from 2 months to 1 month so you can see your rolling last month data. We can do that inside of our post model where we have the group by day, just like in the Gem Spotlight. we need to add a range here, which is just going to be a range 1.month.ago. And because this is a range, you need to give this where it starts from and where it's going to, which is just going to be time.now. If you don't have the time.now, I don't think it'll actually change what your analytics are. For me, it kept it as, it still showed the last 2 months until I did the .time.now. Now that that's done, I'm gonna hit Control S to save this, refresh, and now we have from May 29th to June 28th, which I guess is the last month maybe, and we are good to go. Let's go back to the admin page here, and you can see our total views are being counted up here, and we have, I guess, a peak of like 41 or 42 views. So that's how you can do site-wide analytics that update in real time using Ahoy, Chartkick, and Groupdate, and how you can seed the data and style it as needed. Hopefully this video was helpful. It was definitely something to make. It was a little bit of an experience, but hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.